Thanks for listening to the Media People Podcast, lively and insightful chats with the people who power the media industry. I'm your host, Victor Genova. For more episodes, you can go to soundcloud.com/mediapeoplepodcast, or you can subscribe on your favorite podcast service like Apple Podcasts or CastBox. Views expressed by participants are personal. It's part one of our chat with Laura Gaggi, founder and CEO of Gaggi Media. In this episode, Laura Gaggi chats with us about life growing up in Toronto, her first gig in media, and why she decided to go out on her own and start Gaggi Media, an agency that's been a major player in the Canadian media world for the past 24 years. Come back next week for part 2, where we'll learn about the growth of Gaggi Media, some of Laura's ventures that didn't go as planned, and her most recent endeavor, Peloton Media. What is Gaggi Media? You're the CEO of it. What does that all entail?
Being CEO of Gaggi Media, what it really entails is trying to survive in a very exciting and dynamic industry right now. And it requires being a visionary about where, I believe the media business is going, where Gaggi Media can pick up new business and thrive and help clients. And it really means watching everything that's going on in the business and staying abreast of it all.
If you know where it's going, please tell me. Because it seems like every time someone throws an article up on LinkedIn about research with this, ad blocking with that, it sounds like I may or may not have a job, or we may or may not have an industry in the next year.
I know, and it's exciting in that regard, and I think with what is going on today, it requires us to stay calm and carry on. You've heard that before, but also to be just enough aware that we have to change and we have to adapt and we have to understand the basics of business as well.
Let's go back to the beginning. Where are you from?
Where am I from? I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Born and raised?
Born and raised. And my mother's born and raised here too. So I was brought up as a Canadian with an incredibly strong and vibrant Canadian mother. And then I had a father who's an immigrant, from the back hills of Italy.
Back hill of Italy. So what was life like then growing up with, say, Canadian mother, immigrant father from Italy in Toronto?
Well, it was interesting and confusing. It was, I think, as I've aged, I realized how exciting it was to live with a different culture, to see, to understand that there's more than Canada. I had an opportunity to go to Italy when I was very young, so I really was always excited about seeing the world, and that had a big influence on me.
I got to ask you, what part of Toronto did you grow up in? Because I had a lot of family that settled in Toronto as well. Were you like in the Dufferin and Rogers Road, St. Clair area?
No, I was actually by Yorkdale Plaza, so I was in.
That's not too far north of there. Dufferin and Rogers
It was
Road?
Dufferin and Lawrence. Yeah, Dufferin and Lawrence, between Dufferin and Lawrence and Dufferin and Wilson.
It's like all the Italians had settled from basically Yorkdale along Dufferin down to St. Clair.
That's right.
What were some of your interests growing up?
Growing up, I had a lot of interests. I think one of the biggest ones as a child was cooking. I had a mother who was an amazing cook. She wrote a cookbook, and I spent a lot of years and a lot of Saturdays in the kitchen watching, cooking programs, believe it or not. This was before the food channel and all that now, but, spending a lot of time cooking. And then I was into languages in a big way again because of my culture. I loved the Italian language and the French language. We studied that a lot. And then as I've aged, I've got mega hobbies now as an adult with a wonderful husband who we collect antique toys. We have a massive fleet of antique boats. We are, we're heavy into the history of Canadian boating. So, and I'm a golfer. I do a lot of things. I still cook.
You said antique toys, and you had me there for a bit. Like, how far back are we going? I'm thinking like rocking horses and things like that. Am I on the right track?
Well, it's all related to the boating industry, boating world, because so it's toys that go probably early 20th century.
Okay.
Up until, sort of up to Japanese tin of the 1950s.
Okay.
So we have an absolutely stunning collection.
But this fleet of boats that you have, where do you keep them?
Well, I keep them. We have an amazing property. My husband owned and his family owned a summer resort business for years, so we have quite a large summer property, and we have lots of boathouses.
And do you still take them out, or are they?
Oh, absolutely.
Or really,
run,
even
yes.
some of the older ones, you don't just kind of like.
You have a long deck
them?
launches. You have the mahogany long deck launches, and we have some fun racing boats and some old fiberglass boats with the fins on them. And my husband, when I met him, he had 450 pre-war outboard motors.
What?
Been able to get him down to a cool 250.
Wait, how many did you say he had?
I said he had 450. He's
Where do you keep
cleaned out the
450 motors?
I tell you, we have huge buildings with it's like a museum, really.
The Gaggi Boat Museum.
That's right. Well, it's actually the Kirk.
The Kirk.
He's a Kirk. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't take his last name.
You were really big into cooking, and boating clearly is a big staple of your life. So how did you find your way into media then?
Well, I was a smart girl. I went to university and I studied English, and I actually found my job through the University of Toronto Employment Services. And it was a job at McKim Advertising, which is now, I guess, I don't know if you even know, McKim Advertising is probably BBDO today, something like that.
So you were in the creative side then?
No, I went in, I wanted to be a copywriter, actually, but I found this media position, and I just flourished. I loved everything about it because I found I could be creative. And then I really loved what media had to offer in terms of just the whole idea of being able to advertise and understand what consumers wanted.
So what did your first role entail then?
I was a media estimator or coordinator, whatever you call them. So I started, in media where we did all the lousy stuff, right? We had to do all the heavy paperwork and the billings, and we have to traffic the TV commercials and radio commercials by hand, and I was a media buyer. I started off as an assistant media buyer.
Those had to be delivered by hand.
Yeah, I didn't start in the world of computers, I hate to tell you.
When I started out in media, it was kind of 50-50. When I was at the CBC, we had stuff that was electronically delivered, but every once in a while, UPS would show up at the 11th hour with a beta tape that had to be trafficked right there and then. How did you grow within that position? Like, what was your next step after just being a media assistant?
Well, the next step is, and I think it still is today, you become either, a media planner, a media buyer, then on to, more senior positions after that. So it was just learning the trade. It was a training position at the beginning, and I excelled in it, and I moved very quickly up the ranks.
Did you find a lot of value working in the trenches early on? Because there are some people in the industry who find a way to, jump that first media assistant level where they'll go to, say, buyer or planner or sometimes even manager or supervisor. But do you find that there was a wealth of experience in there that groomed you for the next step?
I think it was invaluable, and I still to this day believe that training and mentoring is critical, which I think is a big part of what's missing in today's sort of media world. If you come to Gaggi, as a young person, you will be trained. You will learn absolutely everything. You will be mentored. That's one of our big differentiations, I think. A lot of people come and they stay a long time. We have an incredible tenure here at Gaggi. We have people who come right out of school and have been here, for 10 plus years.
And that's a big thing.
Kelly Dutton, who's our president of Gaggi Media, she's been with us over 18 years, and we have many who've been here over 10 years. So we have great tenure here because we train and we build people up and we make them very strong media people.
And that's a big thing, especially if people listening in who aren't too familiar with the media industry, especially on the agency side, supplier side as well. There's usually a lot of turnover. Oh,
there's frightening turnover. That's probably one of the things I suffer most as a CEO is the turnover at client level. The tenure is so short that it's just so hard to have relationships anymore. And that's obviously a very new thing in this, this day and age. We can hide behind emails and we can, You know, we don't have to answer the phones because we can see who's calling. And it's a new world, but it's hard to keep relationships. So
FaceTime is very important.
It's what I suffer from mostly.
But you did leave that job you had, and eventually you went out on your own. And what made you start Gaggi Media? Like, what was that moment when you said, I can do this on my own, or I'm going to go out on my own?
What I did was, well, first of all, I spent 8 years in my first job with some incredible people. And I told you I was trained in the best way I could possibly be trained to be a strong media person. And then I went to Vickers and Benson, which doesn't exist anymore. It turned into Arnold at some point. I can't tell you what it is now. I lose track who's who. But I basically hit the glass ceiling.
Mm.
And I had been at, I guess, V&B 8 years, and I wanted to be president of what was Genesis Media, because what was happening at the time, it was 1992 when I started Gaggi Media, which was 24 years ago. But
happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Your anniversary was just last month.
Yeah, thank you. But what was happening at that time is that media agencies large agencies were splitting off their media arms, and media agencies were becoming independent businesses so they could grow and build out beyond, the agency they were part of. And so that's what happened at V&B. They split off. We basically merged with Media Canada at the time. So Vickers and Benson Media merged with Media Canada, which was a $90 million government agency, and they put these two different cultures together and called it Genesis Media. So V&B was an incredibly creative place. Like, I came from probably one of the most creative media environments you can imagine. We worked with Terry O'Malley, who was the CEO at the time of Vickers and Benson.
Very familiar with Terry O'Malley.
I love this man. He loved me, actually. We had a great relationship because I was a very creative media person. He really respected media creativity. He also brought us into meetings where we could be part of the promotions that were going on, or sponsorships or PR, whatever was going on for a client, we were part of, even the creative discussions. So I came from this really creative media environment. And even at McKim, we had incredible leeway to be creative. And then they brought in this government AOR. Can you imagine the clash of cultures?
Yep.
Oh my God, it was horrible. Anyway, I wanted to run this thing, but I was young. I was 35 years old. And, I thought I could do it. I knew how to do it. I had no problem doing it, but there were a lot of men that didn't think I don't think they could handle me doing it. So lucky me, I resigned, and 3 clients came with me.
Ah, okay.
So I started Gaggi with 3 incredible pieces of business. They actually came with me instead of staying at Vickers and Benson. And it was Heineken, Gatorade, and 3M.
Those are huge clients
to have. Huge clients. So I was highly respected. And I just flourished from there. I started to pick up businesses. The next business was Land Rover. When Land Rover came to Canada, I picked up the Snapple business that was also part of this, the Quaker Oats, the Gatorade family. And then it just went on and on from there. Picked up Loblaws, President's Choice, and then it just got incredibly wonderful for a lot of years.
Let me ask you about that. You mentioned picking up those clients. I know we were talking about this earlier. I'm a sales rep by day, and there is an apparatus in place to anticipate me, to RFP me so I can pitch on business. But you as an agency head, having to go out and source new business and bring those clients in, I imagine it's a lot different. So how do you guys go about doing that? What is the process like? You share that with me, because that's something I find I'm very curious about. Okay,
I'm not going to give away all the secrets.
Don't give away the secrets, but
I'll tell you, it's changing because of this business is changing, and technology is causing it to change. But historically, most agencies size of Gaggi, which is mid-size, it's not a big, large global agency. We got business through our networking and our reputation.
Okay.
The change is that because The change is that the technology is not allowing you to network the way you want to network anymore. I mean, you go to a conference, everybody's on their smartphones. They don't even look at you. Like, it's so difficult to do things that you used to be able to do. We can't even send an email to somebody now because it's, and we have anti-spam legislation. That's true. So it's not easy to connect with people, and I'm doing it two ways. I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. I'm still networking and building networks, but sadly, as you mature in this business, a lot of my generation of people have retired or have been let go in the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years. So my network has dwindled. So I'm trying to build a new network, which is not easy, so I have to go out a lot.
Yep.
It's hard, but also I'm also using some incredibly new technology to generate new business.
I won't ask you what that is,
but I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's
the secret sauce.
There's a bit of secret sauce, but there is technology available now.
Let's go back to Gaggi Media version 1.0 when you just started. Is it safe to say that even though you were running the agency, you were still involved in a lot of the day-to-day stuff, like the buying and planning and stuff like that?
I did everything.
You did everything?
Everything.
Well, how many people were on staff when you started? You had 3 clients that you brought over with you, very major clients.
I was doing most of it myself, and then I started to hire people. There were 2 or 3 of us for a long time.
And where was the original office?
Where was my original office?
Yeah, like the first Gaggi Media office.
First Gaggi Media.
Because now we're in Yonge and Eglinton.
I was very fortunate. Again, it's back to Terry O'Malley. We had such a high respect for each other that he actually allowed me to stay. He wanted me to stay in their offices. So I had an office at Vickers and Benson as an independent consultant for these 3 clients, and I did all their media for them, even though V&B still did the creative.
Okay.
But I did all the media outside of their media department. So that's where I started. And then I had to move out eventually. And I moved in with the Gatorade event marketing team.
We're going to stop it right there, but come back next week for part 2 of our chat with Laura Gaggi. For more episodes, you can go to soundcloud.com/mediapeoplepodcast or subscribe on your favorite podcast service like Apple Podcasts or CastBox. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Vic Genova.